There comes a moment in every life when everything feels like it's falling apart. The people you trusted begin to drift away. The plans you made no longer make sense. And the road ahead, it disappears beneath your feet. It's in that moment when the breaking begins that most of us wonder, did God forget me? Why is this happening now? But the truth is, He hasn't left. You see, before God ever lifts you, He breaks you, not to destroy you, but to reshape you. He removes what you can't carry into the next season. He strips away what you thought you needed so He can give you what you were always meant to have. It doesn't feel holy, it doesn't feel kind, but it is love, it is preparation. And in the breaking, He is closer than He's ever been. It starts quietly, not with a storm, but with a slow unraveling. Things you used to depend on, people, plans, places, begin to shift beneath your feet. The phone calls come less often. The opportunities dry up. You wake up one morning and realize something in your spirit feels heavier. And at first you try to fix it. You pray harder. You push more. You tell yourself it's just a phase. But deep down, something tells you this is not a detour. This is the beginning of something. And not the kind of beginning that feels exciting. This one feels like the end. That's how it starts. Before the lifting, before the blessing, God begins with the breaking. You won't always notice it at first. It doesn't scream. It whispers. You start losing interest in the things that once fueled you. Conversations that used to spark something now leave you empty. Doors that once opened with ease now seem bolted shut. It's disorienting. It's frustrating. And it hurts. Not the kind of hurt that wounds you on the outside. No, this is deeper. This is the kind of pain that moves quietly through the cracks of your soul, touching everything you thought was stable and making you question how solid it ever was. You might look around and wonder what you did wrong. You might assume you've stepped out of God's favor. But that's not what's happening here. You are not being punished. You are being prepared. And preparation doesn't always look like progress. Sometimes it looks like loss. Before God lifts you, He has to make sure that what He's lifting is ready. And that means removing what isn't meant to go higher with you. Not every friendship, not every opportunity, not every version of you can survive at the next level. The weight of your calling is too great to be carried by an untested version of yourself. So God breaks you, not to harm you, but to strip you of what you never needed. The breaking doesn't feel holy. It feels like abandonment, like confusion, like silence. But it's not the silence of distance. It's the silence of a surgeon focused on precision. God is doing His most delicate work in the stillness. While you wonder where He is, He's reshaping you into someone who can carry the blessing without being crushed by it. And maybe that's the hardest part, realizing that the very pain you're praying to be delivered from is the tool God is using to deliver you into who you were always meant to become. That the tears you cry in private are watering the soil of your future strength. That this isn't chaos, it's construction. It doesn't feel like elevation, it feels like collapse. But in heaven's blueprint, every great rising begins with a fall. Every divine assignment starts with surrender. And every blessing big enough to change your life begins with the kind of breaking that feels like it might just end it. But it won't. You're still in His hands. It's one of the hardest things God will ever ask of you, to let go of what you thought you couldn't live without. You don't see it coming, not at first. There's no warning label when something you've loved starts slipping through your fingers. It might be a person, a dream, a version of life you held so tightly you shaped your identity around it. And slowly, painfully, it begins to drift. Not because you did anything wrong, not because God is angry, but because it can't go where He's taking you. You'll try to hold on. You'll pray for restoration. You'll replay every moment in your head, asking what you missed. But the truth is, some things weren't meant to follow you. Some people weren't designed to stay. Some seasons were never meant to be permanent. And while your heart aches at the loss, heaven is rejoicing in your obedience. Because obedience isn't just about saying yes to what's coming. It's also about saying goodbye to what can't stay. You may feel like God is taking something from you, but He's actually making space, clearing the room in your life and your soul for what's next. Because what you're clinging to might feel good, familiar, comforting, safe, but it's too small for your calling, too limited for your next chapter, too heavy for your next elevation. There's nothing easy about this kind of loss. It doesn't come with quick answers or perfect peace. It comes with wrestling, with doubt, with long nights where you whisper prayers through tears and wonder if God hears you at all. But even in that grief, there's a quiet truth rising beneath the surface. God doesn't remove to punish, He removes to protect, to prepare, to position you for something you can't yet see. And one day you'll look back and understand. You'll see why that relationship had to fade, why that job had to end, why the thing you thought would last forever suddenly crumbled. It wasn't failure, it was transition. It was mercy disguised as disappointment. It was God's hand pulling you forward, even when your heart begged to stay behind. It hurts now, of course it does. You're human and grief is real, but what's on the other side of this heartbreak is a version of you you've never met, stronger, freer, ready for the blessing that used to feel too big to carry. So let it fall away, not because you're giving up, but because you're growing. And growth always costs something. Sometimes what it costs is what you once thought you couldn't live without. It's a strange kind of silence, the one that fills your life when God pulls you away from the crowd. The phone stops ringing. Invitations stop coming. The people who once felt close now feel miles away, even if they're right in front of you. At first, it feels like rejection, like abandonment. You wonder if you've done something wrong, if maybe you're just too much, too intense, too focused, too different. But what if I told you it's not rejection at all? What if it's refinement? What if the isolation you're feeling isn't a punishment, but a holy place God has carved out just for you? We talk about preparation like it always happens in motion, in public, in the glow of affirmation. But the truth is, God does His deepest work in hidden places. He doesn't elevate before He separates. And separation always comes first. You weren't left behind. You were pulled aside. He's trying to speak to you in a way the noise never allowed. And sometimes the only way God can get your full attention is by removing the distractions, not forever, but for now, because He knows what's coming and you don't. He sees the weight you'll carry in the next season, and He knows you need roots before you can carry the crown, so He puts you in a quiet place, a place where it's just you and Him, where the voices fade, the applause stops, and all you can hear is your own breath and His whisper. It's lonely. Of course it is. You weren't meant to live in isolation forever, but you were meant to pass through it. This is where you wrestle. This is where you break. This is where you heal. This is where your identity is no longer built on what they said, but on what He said. And if you sit in that silence long enough, you begin to hear something deeper, not the echo of abandonment, but the sound of being called. God is removing the noise because He's refining your name. He's preparing you for an assignment that isn't for everyone to understand. Not everyone can go with you. Not everyone should. Some seasons require solitude because the next chapter requires strength. So if you're in a quiet place right now, if the world feels far and your soul feels exposed, don't rush out of it. Don't numb it. Don't run. Sit, listen, let the loneliness do its work, because you're not being forgotten, you're being formed. The pain didn't come to ruin you, it came to reveal you. At first, it just burns, sharp, sudden, unrelenting. You try to pray it away, you beg for relief, you search for reasons, wondering if it's a consequence of something you did or failed to do. But no matter how many questions you ask, the silence remains, not cruel, just constant. And in that silence, the fire keeps burning. But this isn't the fire that consumes, it's the fire that refines. You don't see it at first because all you feel is the heat. Loss, rejection, betrayal. Doors you were sure would open now sealed shut. Dreams you held in your hands now ash at your feet. And it feels personal, it feels unfair, but it's not punishment, it's process. God doesn't allow fire without purpose. He uses it to strip away what can't last, what isn't solid, what isn't true. The version of you that walked into the fire won't be the same one that walks out. That's the point. He's burning off the fear, burning off the pride, burning off the pieces of you that were built by other people's opinions. And what remains, that's the part He's after. That's the you He can build on. That's the you that can carry weight without cracking. Fire exposes what can't survive heat. It brings weakness to the surface. It forces out what's been hiding, and that's why it hurts so much, not because God is far, but because He's closer than He's ever been. Shaping, pressing, refining. You are not broken. You are becoming. becoming. This isn't chaos. It's craftsmanship. You are in the hands of a master who knows exactly how much heat you can take. He's not trying to destroy you. He's making sure you shine. Gold doesn't fear the fire because it knows what it becomes on the other side, and neither should you. So don't curse the pain. Don't run from it. Lean in. Let it burn what no longer serves you. Let it make you strong enough for the blessing you haven't seen yet. Because when you step out of this fire, you won't just be healed, you'll be holy. You'll be ready, you'll be new. You pray, and nothing happens. Not right away, not the way you hoped. You speak into the darkness and wait for the echo of heaven, but all you get back is stillness. And the stillness grows. It creeps into your mornings, your nights, your thoughts. You keep going through the motions, kneeling, believing, whispering words with trembling faith, but it starts to feel like you're speaking into a void. This is the silence that tests you, not because God is absent, but because he's working in a place you cannot see. You see, there's a silence that comes before the miracle, a quiet space between who you were and who you're becoming. It's uncomfortable, confusing, painfully slow. And yet this is where the deepest roots grow, because God isn't always loud when he's working. Sometimes the most powerful things he does happen beneath the surface. You don't feel it, you don't see it, but the soil of your soul is being broken open, so something stronger can take hold. You're being rooted, not ignored. He's stretching your trust past what makes sense, teaching you to believe without evidence, to hope without signs, to love him even when the feelings fade. That's real faith. Faith that's not based on answered prayers, but on unshakable trust. And maybe, just maybe, this silence is an invitation to listen deeper, to surrender more, to learn how to stand when you can't be carried. Because elevation without foundation will always collapse, and God loves you too much to let you rise before you're rooted. So he waits, and he lets the silence linger, not to hurt you, but to hold you steady while he builds the strength you'll need later. Remember, a tree doesn't grow taller by reaching, it grows taller by going deeper, and so will you. This is the space where real strength is born, not in the noise, but in the knowing. In the trust that says, even if I don't hear you, I still believe you. Even if I don't feel you, I'm not walking away. That kind of faith moves heaven. So if you're in the silence between prayers, if you're waiting for answers that haven't come, don't lose heart. Don't mistake the stillness for absence. God is closer than he's ever been. And when he moves, when the breakthrough finally comes, you'll know why he took his time. He wasn't late. He was laying the roots. It starts with a restlessness you can't explain. Your life might look fine from the outside. You're doing what you've always done, going where you've always gone, smiling when expected, showing up when needed. But something in you won't settle. It's not anxiety, it's not fear. It's a stirring, quiet but undeniable, a sense that where you are is no longer where you belong. At first you try to ignore it. You convince yourself it's just a phase. You push it down, distract yourself, drown it out with noise, but it keeps rising in the quiet moments, in the middle of the night. When the world slows down and your heart finally has space to speak, you feel it again, the nudge, the whisper, the ache for more. This is what it feels like when your calling begins to wake up. It doesn't come with flashing lights or loud announcements. It comes as holy discomfort. It disrupts your patterns, unsettles your routines, and refuses to let you get comfortable in places you've outgrown. Because God didn't design you for survival. He designed you for purpose. And purpose always starts with a disturbance. You'll feel like something is missing, even when everything around you seems complete. That's not emptiness. It's space. Space God is creating in your spirit so he can fill it with what's next. You are being awakened, not to more of the same, but to a life you haven't even imagined yet. The reason you can't shake the feeling is because heaven is calling, and your soul has started to answer. The dreams you buried are being resurrected. The gifts you've ignored are being stirred. You're beginning to see yourself not as you've been, but as you were meant to be. And yes, it's uncomfortable. Change always is. But discomfort is not your enemy. It's a signpost. It's God tapping your spirit and saying, it's time. You're not being ungrateful, you're being prepared, you're not lost, you're being called. And if you listen closely, beneath the restlessness, beneath the hunger for more, you'll hear it, God's voice not shouting but stirring, calling you forward. So don't run from the stillness, don't rush back into the noise. Sit in the shift, let the ache rise. because that ache is holy. That ache is the first sign that your next chapter is already on its way. There comes a point in every journey where the road disappears, not literally, but spiritually. You look ahead and nothing is clear. No signs, no certainty, just fog where there used to be direction. And this is where faith gets real, because faith was never about walking in the light. It was never about knowing every step before you take it. Faith is about movement in the dark, believing before seeing, stepping before understanding, trusting without a map. God doesn't always explain. He often leads you with silence, guides you with peace instead of answers, and calls you to walk forward without the clarity you crave. And that's hard, so hard, because we're human. We want blueprints, we want confirmation, we want the whole picture before we commit. But God doesn't hand out the whole picture. He gives you one step and waits to see what you'll do with it. This isn't to test your strength, it's to train your surrender. Because real faith, deep, anchored, unshakable faith, doesn't wait for certainty. It trusts in the character of God even when His plan is hidden. You will reach places in life where everything inside you wants to freeze, where fear whispers, don't move until it makes sense. But God is whispering something else. Move even though it doesn't. And that's when you find out what your faith is built on. Not feelings, not proof, but trust. The kind of trust that says, if you're leading, I'll follow. Even when it's uphill, even when it's lonely, even when it feels like nothing is changing. Because I know you don't lead to leave, you don't call to abandon. And if I can't see the road, then maybe I'm just supposed to see you. Faith isn't blind, it's focused. It looks past the fog and finds the one who never fails. And in that focus, you start to move again. Not because the path got clearer, but because your heart got steadier. So if you're standing at the edge right now, if the next step looks invisible, take it anyway. Let surrender lead the way, because the ground may be uncertain, but the one who walks beside you never is. There's a moment when the stirring turns into a choice. You've heard the whisper, you've felt the shift, and now God is asking you to move. But here's the part we don't always talk about. Obedience is heavy. Not because the step itself is impossible, but because what it costs you is everything familiar. God doesn't always call you to what's comfortable. He calls you to what's necessary. And that calling will often take you through uncertainty, through fear, through territory where your feet have never been, and your heart isn't sure it wants to go. Obedience doesn't wait until it feels easy. It moves while the fear is still present. It says yes, even when there are no guarantees. It walks when the ground isn't firm yet, because trust isn't about certainty. It's about surrender. And that's what makes the first step so heavy. It requires letting go of what you can see in order to follow a voice you can only hear. It requires silencing the part of you that needs answers and feeding the part of you that just believes. Noah built an ark in sunshine. Abraham left without a destination. Peter stepped out of the boat onto waves that hadn't calmed. Every story of divine movement begins with an act of obedience that made no sense, except to the one who gave the command. God isn't asking for your perfection. He's asking for your yes, not when you've got it all figured out, but now, right here, with what you have, with where you are, with a trembling voice and a mustard seed of faith, because delayed obedience is still disobedience. And the longer you wait, the heavier the step becomes, not because God is punishing you, but because your fear grows louder the longer it goes unanswered. The window doesn't stay open forever. And sometimes the miracle waits on movement, so you lift your foot. And the weight of the unknown presses down. Your mind screams, what if this doesn't work? But your spirit knows, what if it does? Obedience isn't about what's ahead. It's about who's leading. And if God has brought you this far, He won't leave you stranded now. Not in a flash, but in a way that honors the process. In a way that makes every tear, every delay, every quiet night full of purpose. Because when God lifts you, it's not just elevation, it's revelation. You don't just rise, you see? You see why it had to take time, why the silence was sacred, why the heartbreak was necessary, why the delay was protection, why the breaking wasn't the end, it was the foundation. And you realize something you didn't fully know before. You were never alone. Not in the stillness, not in the fire, not in the empty rooms or unanswered prayers. He was there. Every step, every breath, every battle. His hand didn't just reach down to pull you out. It held you steady when you couldn't stand. It guided you when you had no map. It caught your tears. It covered your heart. It never let go. And now, as you rise, you're not just stepping into a blessing. You're stepping into a deeper awareness of who held you together, of who shaped you, of who never left. The lifting doesn't make the pain disappear, but it puts it in perspective. It gives it weight, meaning. It transforms the scars into strength, the losses into lessons, the weight into wisdom. You'll walk differently now, not because you're above the struggle, but because you've been through it and came out anchored in something stronger than certainty. You came out anchored in trust. So when the time is right, not your time, but His, He lifts you, and not just high, but whole. And as you look back, you won't wish the process away. You'll thank God for every breaking moment that made this rising possible. Because it wasn't just about getting to the next level. It was about becoming the kind of person who could carry it with grace. And now you know you are, because He never left, and He never will. So take the step, even if it shakes, even if your voice cracks when you say yes. Because the first step into the unknown is often the first step into everything God promised. There's a sacred work that happens in the dark. Not the darkness of evil, but the kind that hides what's in progress. It's the place between obedience and outcome, between the yes and the fulfillment, where it looks like nothing is changing, but everything is. You may not feel it, you may not see it, but right now, God is shaping you in ways that only heaven can measure. Because before the blessing arrives, before the breakthrough breaks through, God always works on the vessel that will carry it. He's not just preparing the promise, He's preparing you. It's easier to focus on the result, the job, the relationship, the opportunity, the miracle. But God's greatest focus isn't what He's about to give you. It's who you're becoming in the waiting. And that becoming, it's uncomfortable, it's slow, it's hidden. You'll start to notice it in small things. You respond differently. You let go quicker. You speak softer, listen deeper, pray more honestly. Not because you're trying to change, but because the shaping has begun. God is carving away what no longer fits. The ego, the fear, the desire to please everyone but Him. He's refining your motives, rebuilding your identity, and reordering your heart. That's why it feels like pressure, why it feels like tension, why you're restless one moment and broken the next. Because He's not just shifting your circumstances, He's shifting your soul. And no one else sees it, not yet. They see the same face, the same name, the same life. But inside, you're being rebuilt. That's the unseen shaping, the holy work that doesn't get applause, the quiet victories no one claps for. But God sees them, and heaven counts them, because this is where destiny is formed, not on stages, but in solitude, not in spotlight, but in surrender. The blessing you're praying for is real. It's coming. But it will land on the version of you that's being shaped right now. Not the one that started the journey, but the one who stayed faithful through the silence. The one who obeyed when it was inconvenient. The one who kept showing up even when nothing made sense. So if you feel like you're being pulled apart, you are. But not to break, to build, to become. God isn't just writing a new story. He's writing a new you to live it. One day, without warning, it shifts. The weight you've been carrying begins to feel lighter. The prayers that once seemed to vanish into silence begin to echo back with clarity. The door that stayed closed for so long creaks open, softly at first, then wider, and suddenly you're standing in a place you once only saw in your dreams. But this isn't luck. It's not chance. It's not the result of your effort alone. This is what it looks like when God lifts you.